NuWell is an online Christian counseling organization. We utilize the Thrive model in our counseling. The Thrive model stands for togetherness, holiness, relevance, integration, vision, and expectancy.
So the process starts with you reaching out and us making contact with you, connecting, and walking through that process of hearing what you need and connecting you with the right counselor.
Pricing, and we have a sliding scale. So we do try to meet people as best we can with what they can afford.
This is not just about abundance for you individually, but about the abundance I believe you can create in the atmosphere around you.
The first step in the Thrive acronym is togetherness, and it's crucial that be first, because nothing else will come together if you don't have that connection, that togetherness. God created us to be in connection, to be in relationship, to not be alone, and our online Christian counseling is centered around building that connection. So oftentimes people will come to us and have that feeling of disconnection or being alone, and so we provide them that opportunity to connect with us in that online space, and then begin to bring that into other areas of their life where they can connect with each other and connect with God. Because if those things don't happen, the rest of this acronym is just going to fall apart.
Yeah. Right. Happiness. We know as Americans we are striving for that American dream of happiness, and as Christians specifically, we often assume if we're unhappy it's because we are somehow unholy. Maybe we're not worthy of the happiness we're actually pursuing. And our goal in our counseling model is to try to remind people that you have redemption, right? That you have an opportunity to feel and bask in the holiness that is offered to you in spite of your brokenness that is probably making you unhappy, a little uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that you are reminded that God still loves you in spite of the angst that you're feeling, in spite of the anxiety you may be dealing with. And quite frankly, it's not up to you to be happy. God gives you opportunity to find happiness in Him regardless of your circumstances. And our goal is always to remind people of that.
Relevance is central to everything we do as online Christian counselors, because each person we see is unique in their background and their experiences. How have you seen that implemented in your sessions with clients?
Yeah, it's funny, the irony of the fact that we work primarily online is that because we live in this online internet age, people are getting opinions and facts and alternative facts that are thrown at them at 1,000 miles per hour from a perspective of people who don't want to be wrong.
Right.
right. And that the idea is that, two things can be true at the same time, which means if that's not true, there is no really relevancy in the world, right? And this opportunity for us to understand that my perspective, my opinion, your perspective, your opinion, both have meaning when we share them, right?
Right.
I tell all my clients, if I'm the only place you're able to share, you're already at a deficit. We've got to be able to make you comfortable with being vulnerable and accountable to those in your life outside of church and outside of counseling specifically, so that you actually understand this concept of relevancy.
Right. So as an individual that is seeking relevancy, you probably are getting lots of advice from people that don't really know you. So as counselors, we don't want to just be another one of those people. We want to truly get to know you and to tailor what we're going to talk about and how we're going to come alongside you in a way that is relevant for you, not just, okay, I have this expertise like all the other well-meaning people in your life have, and just kind of give you advice and direction. And we want to get to know you and to be able to tailor that direction and guidance that we give to you and to be relevant. So as we continue down the Thrive acronym, we get to integration. And that's about bringing all of it together, right? Bringing every aspect of who you are as an individual. Give me some ideas of how that comes about in your counseling sessions.
Steve, sometimes the way we deal with that aspect is to help a person kind of prioritize the different spaces of who they are into their lives. Like, there are pockets of you, or silos, if you will. And some of them are about the role you play, but some of them are more closely tied to your identity, right? And sometimes if we're not careful, we may prioritize a role over our identity. And as Christians, we're losing automatically if we do that.
Right. So we really need to find what are some of those more foundational or central pieces that are causing other things to fall apart. Because we focus on kind of like if we keep replacing the shingles on our roof, but we don't address the foundation. So we need to find those pieces that are more central to what we're experiencing and how to address those. And sometimes when we address one area of life, others begin to fall into place. So as we integrate the concept of being a visionary into our online Christian counseling here at NuWell, sometimes I find people that are almost like hesitant to have a vision because they're kind of like just sitting there kind of waiting on God. Well, God is sovereign. Of course God's sovereign. But that doesn't mean you're not an active player in that process. And sometimes I like to think of this sort of as a slice of the pie. Right, that God has a slice of the pie that He wants me to function in. He certainly has a function for me, a purpose for me. But in that pie, in that slice, I'm kind of participating in that process. And at the one end of the pie, it's a little bit broad. Right, and so in the beginning of this, I'm moving around trying to figure it out. Right, but as I move towards the center, it hones and gets sharper. And that's God with me, creating vision, creating purpose, creating direction, and getting somewhere where I feel like I'm accomplishing what God has called me to.
Cookies and pie.
As we were developing this Thrive acronym, everything sort of fell in place right away, except for the E. And I think it was elusive to me because I didn't grow up expecting God to show up.
Oh, wow.
And so I needed God to just kind of hammer me with that. And when it hit me that, it's supposed to be expectancy, it just blew me away because I was humbled by the fact that so often is missing for me. And I think that a lot of the people that we see in our online Christian counseling sphere is that they don't expect God to show up. And whether that might be conscious or subconscious, but you can't believe what you don't believe, right? If you weren't brought up and acclimated into that idea of, I pray and I seek God and like He's there. Right. If it's more theological or more, conceptual in a lot of churches, in a lot of ways that people will come to us, through that background, they don't expect God to show up, and it's kind of like we have to develop that as a, as a skill almost, or even kind of like you think about it like weight training. Like you can't start with 300 pounds, you might start with 10, right? So expecting God to show up and looking for Him and finding Him in those little things helps you expect Him and find Him in those bigger things.
The people behind us on the screen right now are a representation of the people whom we've come in contact with, gotten to know, vetted on a very deep and personal level, who will be serving you. And at the end of the day, we have meaningful relationships, each of us one-to-one, as well as the other members of our staff, not pictured here and not sitting here with us at this time, both locally and around the country, to get to know each other, to get to know each other's specialties, to get to know each other's ministries and passions, as well as to get to know each other's needs. There is a term in our industry called supervision, where groups of counselors get together in an iron sharpens iron sort of setting where we share our most difficult casework with each other, right? And we do that, and that's the clinical. But the other end of that is spiritual. We pray with and for every single one of these individuals, for their ministries, for each of you whom they will be serving. And we know for a fact that is a deep and meaningful way in which we separate ourselves from the competition, if you will, because you can't work with hundreds of thousands of people and expect to create that sort of intimacy. An intimacy that only aids us in our ability to serve you.
Yeah, that intimacy is crucial. And that's so lacking in a lot of the care that's out there. And so we are very, very intentional about bringing that intimacy both individually as well as sort of corporately. With our organization, connecting, we take it very seriously, connecting with churches and other organizations. That's a process that we have to know that they're in sync. And the churches that we work with locally, if we're going to have a counseling center in that church, we need to be comfortable that that's a church our clients could go to.
Very much so.
And when we work with churches online, we want to make sure that we can serve that church in a way that's effective for them. We're not just looking for business, we're looking for effectiveness.
Right.
And intimacy is a way of being able to determine that. We have to get to know each other relationally to be able to connect.
Yeah.
One of the things that you do here is you manage a lot of our care team, which are working directly with people that are calling in. What do you and the care team hear a lot as far as, what are they expecting, and how are we different than maybe what they're expecting us to be?
When people are calling in?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think when people are calling in, I think one of the things that kind of sets us apart, or maybe they're not expecting, is the conversation that we're having with them up front to really get to know them and where they are. I think a lot of people have experiences where they're not getting calls back at all. And when they do, they're being told that maybe they can't, there's nothing for them at the moment, or maybe there's nothing that really suits them, or they're not being heard, and
they're being treated like as a number.
Yes, they're just kind of being shuffled through a system maybe. And here there is a desire for us to really understand and hear like where you're coming from and what we can do to help you in that. And so I think that's something that people appreciate, just being heard and understood, and really trying to find a match for clients that, will be a good fit for you.
Sometimes the first question we get asked is, how much does it cost? and I understand it, but at the same time, it kind of drives me a little nuts, because online Christian counseling isn't a commodity, right? It's not something that is, this one and this one, we just compare the prices. There's a quality element. But we do have to get down to the nuts and bolts, and do have to talk a little bit about pricing, and we have a sliding scale. So we do try to meet people as best we can with what they can afford. Our sliding scale is from 80 to 125. We do a lot of creative things with that, though, beyond just that sliding scale. So someone, can't even afford $80. We can package things so that they can come less frequently, and we can provide them with more homework. So, for example, someone can come once a month with a number of assignments and things like that to help them stay connected with that process.
Right.
So it's not like, it's going to be $80 a week or nothing.
Right.
We also do creative things with churches, where sometimes churches will pay a percentage of that. And like we've talked about in other places, that we can even have churches that can pay for all of that, or purchase packages that they can decide how they want to do that with their clients or their people.
Right. This is an organic experience for you, and we want to tailor the type of rhythm, the type of connectivity, and just as we want to be certain that we're putting you with the right service provider, we want to make sure that person is servicing you well, but within your means and your availability. And that means whatever it means for you, quite frankly. It doesn't have to look like what it means for your neighbor or the person at the other church or what have you. And I think that's another way we separate ourselves from other online service providers, be they secular or Christian. And one of the last things we would ever hope to become is an additional burden for you. Right? And we understand that finances, quite frankly, are one of the things that is quite cumbersome for most individuals and couples when it comes to making this sort of decision. And we want to try to assuage that and take that burden away from you as best as we can.
Yeah, and another way that they also look at this is sometimes people are, debating on that cost, how much it's going to cost. I also want them to ask themselves, how much it's going to cost me not to do this.
The opportunity cost.
Opportunity cost, that even lost real revenue with productivity in the workforce and things like that, just loss of satisfaction in life. There's a cost to a lot of that. There's a cost to staying sick, right? And there's a cost to getting well. And you have to look at both of those costs side by side. You can't just say, well, this is going to cost and I don't want to pay that, but ignore the cost that it is to stay sick or broken.
Right. It's hard to put a price tag on peace.
It is. And we work as best we can to make that work for everyone, with our packages and our sliding scale and just the frequency of appointments to just meet people where they are.
So typically what happens, we try to get people connected as quickly as we can. Sometimes if there's some hesitance to actually schedule a first appointment, we do offer a free consult, so they can just have 30 minutes to touch base with the counselor or therapist, and just make sure that it would be a good fit, ask any questions they may have, and hear how they would approach the counseling sessions. And then after that, we do try to get people scheduled within a week's time. Sometimes it can take a little bit longer, but we try to do that as quickly as possible. We have an easy way to pay online, so we can get that set up before the sessions, and there's no commitment to that payment. You pay at the time of the session, so there's no subscription or anything that they would have to pay ahead for that.
Thanks so much for listening to this presentation of Voices of Hope. We're thrilled to be providing this conference and the resources it has to offer. Fresh Hope for Mental Health is a faith-based mental health ministry offering support groups, free resources, and effective ministry programs, which are all based upon 25 years of clinical research. Support includes faith-based mental health support groups for adults and teens, both locally and online, trauma healing groups, hope coaching, a retreat for pastors and ministry leaders to process the wounds of ministry, plus help for widows. Fresh Hope also helps churches implement effective mental health ministries within their local settings and communities. You might say that Fresh Hope is a plug-and-play ministry for churches to embed into their ministry. Visit freshhope.us to find out more.